Okay. All right, we can get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the American Solar Energy Society's education webinar, all about understanding how different people learn about renewable energy. We're so glad you could join us today. Happy Friday. My name is Ella Nielsen, and I am the programs director here at ACES. To kick things off, I would like to inform you of who ACES is and highlight some of our current events and programs. So the American Solar Energy Society is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we were established back in 1954, and we advocate for sustainable living and 100% renewable energy by sharing information, events, and resources to cultivate community and power progress. You can join our community at any time as a member at ases.org/join. And you all, as webinar registrants, get a special discount. Feel free to use the code webinar for 10% off. Some fun updates on our programs. So as you may know, we are hosting the American Solar Energy Society's 55th annual National Solar Conference. It's called Solar 2026, Solar for All Y'all, based in Austin, Texas on October 19th through 21st. We're super excited about this year's conference. We have a lot of great confirmed plenary speakers like Bill McKibben, author of Here Comes the Sun, and Anya Schoolman, who is the executive director of Solar United Neighbors, in addition to many technical sessions about the latest policies and technologies in the renewable energy industry. We're going to have a really fun 50th anniversary party for one of our state chapters, the Texas Solar Energy Society, and plenty of networking opportunities for anyone. Oh, as a reminder, early bird rates do end the end of this month on July 31st. So please be sure to register if you're interested and save 20% at ases.org/conference. Another update on one of our major programs is the National Solar Tour. It's the largest annual grassroots solar event, which includes photovoltaics, passive solar, wind, electric vehicles, sustainable living, and energy-first strategies. Tours are hosted by homeowners, businesses, schools, religious institutions, organizations who post, and they essentially post their own tour on the National Solar Tour map, which you can see on the right. And we provide the platform, support, promotion, resources, etc., for all tour organizers. Thousands of people attend, both in-person and virtual tours. We always have at least one tour in all 50 states. So we're really excited to have such a diverse audience and tour hosts. And so this year's showcase weekend is October 2nd through the 4th, which is kicking off October's Energy Awareness Month. Although the showcase weekend is that first weekend of October, anyone can host in-person or virtual tours anytime throughout the year. Lastly, our Solar Today magazine is our flagship publication that's been informing and inspiring our community since 1987. We send out 4 issues per year to over 20,000 of our ACES members, with some of our articles published directly on our website for open access. Solar Today is both a printed and digital publication written by experts and industry leaders across the renewable energy field. It delivers data-driven, fiercely enthusiastic reporting on the solar industry, helping our readers understand and navigate the energy transformation with a special focus on solar power in the US. We are always looking for contributors to the magazine, so if you're interested in pitching an article, please email me at info@ases.org, and I will send you the instructions. Feel free to check out our latest issue of Solar Today. This is our summer issue, all about how AI is revolutionizing the way we use electricity. Thank you so much for listening to these ACES updates. I do want to note that this webinar will be posted on the ACES YouTube channel later today. Feel free to make any sort of comments or questions in the chat section, and we'll be sure to address them. Now I will be kicking it off to John Steele, who is the Education Division Chair, who will introduce himself, provide a little background on the Education Division, and then also introduce our wonderful speaker for today, Jay Warmke. Thanks again, and I will hand it off to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Ella. It's very exciting to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion that Jay and I are going to have. We've been talking about it for a while now, and we finally get to do it. So that's wonderful. The ACES Education Technical Division is a new one, as Ella says, and really the goal is to gather all the great information and knowledge that resides within all of ACES technical divisions into one, what I'm calling online site. If some of you may know, there's something called Moodle, and I'm planning on Moodling it here at some point in the near future. We also will have a very special session at the conference in Texas, in Austin this fall. So if you're attending the convention conference, you'll get to see several of the educational activities within ACES that are happening. So that's all good. But before we begin, I have to share some good news, actually some great news. We're living through the fastest deployment of an energy technology in the history of humanity. In 2025, the world installed more than 600 gigawatts of new solar capacity in a single year. In a single year. More solar than anyone thought possible just a few years ago. Solar is now the largest source of installed electric generation capacity on Earth, with nearly 2.8 terawatts installed worldwide. Think about that for a moment. Every sunrise now powers more houses, more schools, more businesses, more communities than any time in human history. So we can be proud of that. That's why organizations like ACES aren't just watching history, we're helping to create it. So I thank you all for joining us. And then with regard to education, technology changes the world, but education changes the people who change the world. That's why what we're doing together in ACES is so important. So again, thank you for coming. And I hope you really enjoy the chat that Jay and I will have today. Jay Warmke has been writing about renewable energy, doing textbooks, teaching solar energy at various colleges across the Midwest and around the world, actually. And one of my favorites, he hosts something called Solar Noon Tuesdays on Solar Noon Ohio time every week. And there's a variety of really informative and current interest topics that Jay covers in those Solar Noon Tuesdays. So if you haven't checked that out, you really should join us. I've become a real fan, and I try to be there every week. And again, Jay has a history of both being involved with solar energy and in particular teaching others about the solar energy and helping them to make their way into the industry for a career. So I'm really looking forward to talking with Jay today. So I'm going to look for Jay on my screen here. There he is. So Jay, welcome. Is there anything you want to talk? Well, I want you to talk about your background and how you got to where you are with solar PV training. But tell us about, some of the things that you've done besides have llamas in your backyard that helped the evolution of the company and got you where you are today.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks, John. And thanks for plugging Solar Noon Tuesday. I do invite everybody to join in. And if you can't find it, I mean, it's on YouTube, but we also, it's a session where we host people from around the world And it's just a lively discussion about topics around solar energy. We try and recap every week what's new in the world of solar. We do a 10-minute update weekly, and then we also will do a deep dive into subjects. And we've got one coming up in a couple of weeks about from a Chinese company that's trying to market to the United States. So we just thought it'd be interesting to hear their perspective about what frustrations are they seeing trying to deal with our tariffs and our government policies that change minute by minute, so they're having those kind of issues. And I know we're going to talk about education here today, but I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things, and some of them are informed, and some of them are not. So hopefully our questions in the chat will keep us on track. As far as my background, I always like to tease that I came to this in the traditional way. My first job after graduating in journalism was in the comic book industry. And so I worked in the comic book industry for a number of years. I became general manager of a company called Diamond Comic Distributors. We sold lots of comics. When I left, we were selling about $50 million worth of comic books a year.
Oh my God.
And then I went into telecommunications and ended up running an association, a global association on telecommunications. And then my beautiful wife and I, who is sitting here watching me, we moved to Europe for a few years just because we wanted to. And when we came back, we started up a sustainability center here in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And so we ran Blue Rock Station. We built the first Earthship that was east of the Mississippi. We had about 50,000 or 60,000 people come on tours, just talking about general sustainability. And as part of that, along the journey, I started getting interested in solar. And to me, solar is just magical. I mean, who couldn't just think solar is magic? You put what is effectively glass, silicon, out in the sun, and it generates power. And it generates, as you were pointing out, a lot of power. We like to talk about in the history of energy. We experienced about 150 years of unprecedented growth economically by harvesting fossil fuels. The fossil fuels were always in the ground. The coal was in the ground. The oil was in the ground and a lot. We only saw this economic activity when you began turning that into economic activity. We've used up about half of the fossil fuels. But according to NASA, the stored energy content of all the fossil fuels that have ever existed on planet Earth are the energy equivalent of 3 days of sunlight. So we've had 150 years of unparalleled economic growth by harvesting a day and a half of sunlight. And now we're in the mode of actually harvesting actual sunlight. So what does that mean? I mean, how does that change? The Industrial Revolution might be just the warm-up act of unparalleled economic activity. So how will society react? I always say that when given this abundance, we'll probably act like frat boys at an open bar. We've never behaved well when presented with abundance. We always figure out a way to overconsume, overindulge. But we have this opportunity. So anyway, so that's how I got into solar, because I thought it was magical. I decided to play with it myself. We put it on our farm. And then I began to find that other people, I started teaching solar, and the resources that I had available, I felt were really bad. I couldn't find a textbook that I liked. I couldn't find support material that I liked. And we began to just create it. And then we started saying, okay, well, if I need it, other people may need it. And so we began to share some of this material. And our organization, Solar PV Training, really took off during COVID, because I had been teaching solar in the classroom for, by then, 10 years or so, 12 years or so. And if you're taught in community colleges or technical schools, any of the people who are online might be teachers. And we were all faced with this moment of, oh, we're going remote. So the administration would tell you, guess what? In 2 weeks, you need to change your class to a remote learning environment. We're not going to give you any training. We're not going to give you any money. Good luck. And
Good luck.
that was kind of it. And we had already decided we were moving into the world of remote just because I was tired of teaching so many classes because there really is a big demand for it. So we were in that process of building it. And what we ended up doing in the middle of COVID is I just identified every school that I could identify that was teaching solar out there. And we sent emails to the instructors that we could find saying, listen, I understand the situation you're in. I understand that you're being told to go remote and you have nothing to go remote with. We have the curriculum, we have the online course, we have the textbook, we have everything available. We will give it to you for free. Just use it. You know, we're all in this together. And oh, by the way, hopefully you'll buy it next time if you like it. You know, that was kind of the whole.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And that sales pitch worked very, very well. Obviously, you know, everybody knew what nice people we are. You know, that was nice. But the other thing is it's a really good product. So then people were saying, okay, this is good. This is what I've been looking for. And that is how our curriculum, our manuals really got to be the preeminent product that's out there throughout North America. And we've tried to expand it worldwide. You know, our philosophy has always been that the primary objective is to disseminate good information as widely as we can. A villager in Nigeria should be able to afford the same world-class educational experience as somebody growing up in Silicon Valley. So why is it that we're charging $200 for a textbook that's, you know, 60 pages long? I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
Plus, I figure people are going to steal it anyway. So let's just help them steal it. You know, let's in this information age, let's, you know, so we gave our curriculum to Ukraine. You know, when the war was happening, we got contacted saying, what would it cost to translate everything into Ukrainian, to disseminate it across the government? And we're like, it'll cost you nothing. Just take it, you know, because I don't have many customers in Ukraine. You know, it's not like it costing me money, you know, and we do the same thing in Africa. We've done the same thing, you know, in other countries where I just figure they're going to rip it off anyway. So let's just give them our blessing, and it can only be good. It can only be good for the industry. It's good for us. You know, these things have a way of coming back. So that's just one of the philosophies of education that we've tried to put in place. So I know I've talked. You need to have time for a question, John.
Oh no, I don't. I'm loving it because I just learned more stuff about what you've been doing, and you know, I mean, I know you're a good guy anyway, but you've just proven it to me again. So that's extra special. So let's talk a little bit. Well, you know, you had this 10 years in the classroom, and then you've been, you know, doing the remote, and I know you do hybrid courses as well. Talk to us a little bit about what's common to those different venues and what's different about them, and how have you grown and learned from the process?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that so many things are things that sort of grow organically. And when we started teaching the courses, of course, we started at where we were. So we started at Blue Rock Station at the Earthship, and we would just offer courses. But then we started partnering in with other nonprofits and say, hey, if you want to put on a solar course, how about if we do a revenue share model where you guys provide the facility, you do the marketing, and I'll come in and teach the class. I'll just bring in all our materials, and it's a way for you to fundraise. It's a way for us to get exposure. And so we did that with a lot of nonprofits, a lot of organic farming communities, you know, organizations, things like that. And then we started getting contacted by community colleges and universities around Ohio initially, but then off into Indiana, Pennsylvania, Michigan, the surrounding states. And they're saying, we're thinking about offering solar, but we're not ready to commit where we hire an instructor, we invest in a lab. So can you come in and teach a class, you know, bring all the equipment? And so we just suitcase it as a 40-hour, 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening, 6 days a week kind of thing. And then we worked out a deal where it was leading to certification. And so we started doing it sort of a road show, trying to get
Mm.
folks into the world of solar before we could hand it off to them, just to let them feel like it worked well for them.
Uh-huh.
And then we evolved that to where we had our curriculum and we're marketing that to community college. Because I really feel like one of the difficulties with any workforce development is it needs to be offered where the people are, and
Yeah.
and so here in solar, we're a relatively small industry. So very few people can afford to fly off to Colorado or to New York or wherever these classes are going to be offered. You've got airfare, you've got hotel, you've got all of this stuff. It really needs to be offered at the local community college and or at your trade school. Well, how do you get quality education into those facilities? And
Mhm.
and one of the issues, and you were just talking about what a nice guy I am. Well, I'm about to really diss the whole community college world. So they're not going to
Yeah.
feel
Yeah,
like,
we're okay.
they're not going
Go
to feel
ahead.
like I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
But the problem with them is they do their job very poorly.
Mm.
For the most part, they do not do a good job of presenting education. And I know that's heresy to say such a thing, but just from my experience, the students at the college or university don't have a clue what courses are being offered at that college or university unless it's part of their core curriculum. Yeah, I mean, the days are long gone when you got a printed book and you could leaf through and say, "Oh, they're teaching a class in pottery. I want to take that." Or look, medieval fortresses. I want a class in that. So they don't even know that they're offering a course in solar or photovoltaics. So
Yeah.
so they don't do well internally marketing. They don't do well externally marketing, and especially in the community college world they're moving to this adjunct professor model where they pay some Yahoo off the street almost nothing to teach the course. And
Mm.
so you usually either get somebody who might know a little bit about teaching but knows nothing about solar, or somebody who knows a lot about solar but nothing about teaching. And then they expect them to just teach the class.
Mm.
And so in my mind, the question is, McDonald's doesn't rely on there being a great cook to make sure that the hamburgers are produced to a quality level that they've pre-appointed. They put systems in place that will assure whatever Yahoo is in there cooking, you're going to get a hamburger that looks sort of like somebody. So we as curriculum developers have to provide enough material to these colleges and universities so whoever they put up there in front of the class, you're going to get a certain level of quality, for the
Mm.
student. And so how can we do that? And that's
Yeah.
been a challenge. And
Yeah.
so we've taken that to where we almost try and do everything for that instructor for them. We build their PowerPoints, we do online training, narrated, we do videos of the slides, we create what is the labs that should be part of this class. So if you have an instructor who follows the template, it's not going to be too different from one institution to another as to what kind of class you're going to get. And I know you and I
Okay.
were talking about this before, where we shouldn't in education rely on exceptional teachers because there are exceptional teachers out there.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
problem is they're the exception.
Yeah.
Most teachers are pretty mediocre. I mean, most people are pretty mediocre. I mean, it's just
On
like
average, we're
on
average,
average,
right?
we're all average. Yeah.
Average, right.
And you know what? Half of them are below average.
That's
So,
right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
so that's
Well,
the
and,
reality.
and we'll go off on that for just a minute. I mean, the whole massively open online course thing, what blew up in the late teens, 20 teens. And, some people are saying, oh, this is going to take over the world. Well, it hasn't yet. But
Mhm.
the idea that you could get, incredibly high quality information transfer online is real. There are fantastic. Professor Freeman's courses from MIT are just great, right? The guy was a
Mhm.
genius. But anyway, for you, what's the most fun part of it? Was it being in the classroom, or was it developing the
No.
curriculum, or?
Yeah, I would say that for me, the part I enjoy most consistently is just learning new stuff. So I guess it's the
Yeah.
curriculum development, it's the
Mm.
writing of the manuals. We this industry is growing and changing so dramatically that we really made the commitment that everything has to be revised every 3 years, pretty much on the cycle of the National Electrical Code,
Okay.
because technology changes. Sometimes it doesn't change as quickly as a 3 year cycle, but the emphasis changes. So, like in the last revision we did, we began to de emphasize lead acid batteries,
Yeah, you can
emphasizing
probably
lithium
go
ion.
when I said hello. Yes, okay.
We began to uh,
Want me to help you?
Somebody needs to mute their
Need to turn this
speaker.
off.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Thanks. Okay, Jay, sorry about that.
yep, that somebody muted me. All right.
Somebody muted.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
rem-
that's online training for us. So I think you and I talked about this, that education hasn't changed very much since, gosh, the days of Socrates, the
Yeah,
days of Lincoln for sure.
yeah,
You get the sage on the stage where somebody who knows a little bit more than the student stands up and says, listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now
yeah,
make notes and repeat it back to me, and we'll call
me,
that a test.
yeah,
So education is nothing more than the ability to parrot back random facts.
right.
And the problem with certification tests or any kind of test is we tend to test on what's easy to test on, not what the student needs to know, because that's difficult to test. What the student really needs to know is how to think. Well, how do you
Yeah,
test somebody on how to think?
think,
What the
yeah,
student needs to know is to show up on time and not be drunk. Well,
yeah,
how do you
right.
test
And pay
that?
attention. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
don't do something stupid.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
like okay,
yeah,
guys.
yeah,
And so we start each of the class and say, okay, we're not going to talk about the theory of photovoltaics. We're not going to talk so much about, the Becquerel and how these things came about. I just want you to hook these wires together and not die.
and
That's the goal here.
get it done
How do
right. Yeah,
how do
yeah,
we get this thing put together so it works and nobody gets hurt?
yeah,
And a lot of the students who are drawn to this, that's something they can easily relate to.
yeah,
So the trick is in a classroom, how do you get them with that basic information that they have to know? You need to know basic electricity. You need to know, Ohm's law. You need to know what is resistance, what is an amp, what is a volt. You need to know, what is an inverter, what is a charge controller, what are its functions, what do they do, what are my options, what system configurations. But that can be very boring, especially when you're brand new to this thing.
yeah,
So how do you get them into it, but don't lose them, and
yeah,
that's where usually the hands-on portion comes in,
yeah,
because they love to play with stuff.
right.
And
Well, I
that's
think we almost all of us learn better hands-on. We're on the same page there. Talking about stuff is not the same as grabbing a hold of those two plugs and figuring out how to put them together. Yeah,
right. Well,
yeah,
and one of the frustrations I had with some of the commercial labs that were available, because in the first classroom I was working in, we had these labs from, I won't even name the company, but they're the standard plexiglass on rollers, and the
yeah,
whole system. It's got all the equipment up there, and you're supposed to hook them all together by taking a wired jack and plugging it into a port, and looking at that stuff, you're like, really? I could do this on a whiteboard. I could just draw this, because
hmm,
you need to know how hard it is to pull wire through a conduit. And you need to
yeah,
scrape your knuckles when you're trying to go into an AC disconnect and it's too small to bend the wires. I want you to be frustrated. I want you to do it wrong,
yeah.
and then I want somebody to walk along and say, what do you think's going to happen when we
But
turn this thing on? You know,
yeah, how
you've
much
just
smoke are we going to get?
yeah.
Right.
I mean, you just wired the line one and line two together in an AC disconnect. Guess what's going to happen? Everything's going to blow up.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you have to make it. I really feel like people learn best when they screw up,
yeah.
and then they
That's
begin to
absolutely.
understand. So we try. So we started developing our own labs.
Uh,
And so the labs use real equipment. And instead of having a conduit that's 150 feet, you just have a 3 foot section of conduit and you're pulling the same wires through that. And we tried to set up a series with our labs we sell now to different schools. Um, these are 13, 14 different lab exercises, but we do string inverter systems, power optimizer systems, microinverter. We do a hybrid system with a small wind turbine that allows them to see the charge controller, the charge is going until it goes to a diverted load. We do batteries in series and parallel, and oh my gosh, we've blown up so many batteries. I mean, that's why all the wires we use have fuses in them because they're
oh
just going to
God.
mess. You just know they're going to mess up. And so all of these labs and so you get, I believe, a really nice, realistic instruction, hands-on
Yeah.
instructions. Plus, it meets all of the criteria for the ETA certification. And I
Uh-huh.
know many of us in the solar industry are familiar with NABCEP as a certification, and many are less familiar with ETA. But I'm a big proponent of ETA, the Electronic Technicians Association, and pretty much all of the authorities having jurisdiction will recognize either ETA PV certification or NABCEP installer
Oh,
certification.
okay.
But the ETA takes the model that these certifications are designed for a classroom environment. So all the hands-on can be done in a classroom where NABCEP assumes you're already installing solar and your certification requires in the field experience. Well, when you're in workforce development, you don't have in-field experience. So if you want to leave that class with an industry
Uh,
recognized certification, ETA aligns very well for the classroom environment because the administrator, the certification administrator, who can be the instructor, oversees and signs off that the students completed these tasks. And so all of our labs are aligned with all of the tasks that are required to get this industry certification. So I really feel like that matches nicely where you can go into a community college or a trade school and the student can leave with an industry recognized certification. And a
gotcha.
lot of these schools are looking for that.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to pull back around. You're talking about this 3-year cycle of you updating your materials, and as you say, the solar business, the solar industry is changing rapidly, and I know in your most recent uh, books and courses, you're starting to talk about solar and storage. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, that means you have to expand your curriculum to talk about batteries and storage and charge controllers and all those other things. And um, well, anyway, that's happening. And in fact, as you and I've talked before, that to me is where the industry is today, right? That's happening.
Sure.
Everybody who's got the few coins they can devote to it is putting batteries on the wall, right? They're just doing
Yeah.
it. And that's a really good thing. What about things that are not being addressed today that what's going to be in your next version that we don't know about yet, or what do you see coming down the road there?
Yeah, I would say it's tough because it all depends on the level that you're trying to address. When you're talking about an entry level person, the
Mm,
real goal is to make sure that they can be productive on the job at the beginning. And really, the
gotcha.
employer is just hoping that person knows the difference between an inverter and a solar panel, and they're not going to do something stupid. So you're really there's the danger of trying to do too much at that
Oh yeah,
introductory level.
yeah,
And I'm guilty of that. I always want to pile this stuff on because I find it super interesting,
yeah.
And as you say, in today's world, more than 50% of installed systems are incorporating batteries already. And as the price keeps coming down, that's only going to rise. So they need to understand the difference between AC coupled systems, DC coupled systems, straight grid tied systems, standalone systems, although they haven't been that common recently. But I think we're going to see more and more of those. So you need to give them an overview but I think it's a mistake to think that they're going to internalize all that information. So that's where we started coming up with Solar Noon Tuesday, where we start saying, okay, there's all this other stuff that if you're really into this, let's give you some additional support information, additional support tools. And there we can go wander off into the really, really fun things about, like energy as a service as opposed to as a commodity. And if we move away from nobody's going to be buying kilowatt hours in the future, they're going to be buying energy services that incorporate that. Or we start talking about bidirectional charging with EVs, and how is that going to dramatically change the way we conceive of and use energy? If our EV is a battery backup system, we basically have the biggest battery backup that you'd never conceive of buying that as a stationary backup. So what are the issues that involve there? And we get into even things like transformers, right? If all of a sudden everybody on your street has an EV and they all come home at 5 o'clock and they plug in their EV at the same time, you're gonna blow up the transformer that's out there on the telephone pole, because all of a sudden
it's not rated for all of us to be at 100%, right?
Yeah,
I know. It took me a while to figure that out, but I've got an 80 kilowatt hour battery sitting out in the driveway right now. I don't need to buy these and hang them on my wall. It's sitting there already. And so, and that's going to be really interesting. And that kind of runs into the next topic, which is AI and solar, right? Because it seems to me that that's where we're going to blend these things together. The AI can be smart enough to figure out which way to be pushing the electrons and keep from blowing up the transformers, right? So.
Sure. Well, and that's the gist of the magazine that's coming out from ACES, is how does AI change the way? And I actually wrote an article for that application. Just we've all come to understand that AI has the potential to kill us all. Why not? That's always fun. But assuming it doesn't, let's just start from the point that we're going to survive. All right.
Let's be positive, right?
All right. That's going to be our starting point. So AI is currently going to be part of the problem, because data centers and all of those are part of that group of activities that's leading to an unprecedented load demand situation. And when you were talking about the optimism of solar at the moment, I think we can put on top of that. We've lived really for the last generation, from 2000 until 2025, with basically zero growth in load demand in the US grid. And what we've seen is renewables replacing some of the aging coal. That's kind of been the dynamic for 25 years. And we're patting ourselves on the back for, wow, look at how great we are. Renewables, solar now is 7% of grid, generation. Well, okay, great. That's a good start. But now we're in a situation over the next very few years, 3, 4, 5 years, where the advent of AI with data centers, the electrification of industry, the electrification of the automobile, the electrification of heat, the electrification of everything, the advent of climate change, the hots are getting hotter, the colds are getting colder. That increases the use of electricity by 10% or so. When you start adding all of these things together, we're looking at about a 40% increase in load demand over the next 3 or 4 years. Well, at the same time, we've got an administration who's decided, what would be great in the face of this crisis? Let's kill every single new generation project that's coming online, because the only new projects that can come online during that time frame are wind and solar, because there's a 7-year wait on natural gas turbines. So if I wanted to go out and build a natural gas generating facility, I got to wait 7 years even before I get the equipment. Nuclear, God, it's just dumb, right? It's just stupid. But the best thing for small nuclear, the best we could hope for, is 16 years in the future. I mean, it doesn't exist. When people say, what about small nuclear? I say, well, why don't we just rely on Fairy's wings? Because Fairy's wings can power anything. It's like these things don't exist. You're just making up stuff.
It's the same virtual concept, right?
So anyway, so wind and solar are really the only option. However, now you bring in AI. Okay, well, AI, if you look at the utility utilization rate, we're sitting at about, I think it's like 72%. So the capacity that is available at the grid on any average day, we only use 72% of it. So if we could figure out through AI a mechanism to harvest that other 28%, well, there's 28% of 40% right there. So just by eking out, and AI can do that by load management, by, transmission of, so we integrate that into it. And then we start talking about weather forecasting and efficiencies that can come about. Enphase just came out with a new product. It's an thermostat that integrates in with your solar system and begins to monitor the temperature, the heating and air conditioning of your home, and adjusting it based on weather forecasting, based on solar production at the moment, and based on virtual power plants that you might be participating in. Well, now AI is beginning to integrate production with consumption with virtual utilities. And I will make a prediction that 10 years from now, the largest utility in the United States will be a virtual utility. It will not be AEP or First Energy or Duke. It will be somebody like Apple who could, for Apple, these companies are going to vertically integrate their production and their consumption. They're becoming the largest consumer of electricity in the country at the moment. They're paying retail. They don't want to pay retail. They can produce it cheaper than they can buy it. So suddenly they'll become their own production. They'll vertically integrate that way. Then, as they're a registered utility, most of these are already registered utilities, but they only have one customer. They have a customer of one themselves. So Apple is a utility with one customer, which is Apple. Well, what if they want to begin to sell to other people? Well, the deregulation of the telecommunication industry gives us a blueprint for the deregulation of the electrical utilities. And we begin to see that if a company like Apple can buy access to the grid, then they can become the facilitators of those of us with solar production. And we're getting screwed over by net metering law, arrangements with our local utility, where I buy from them for 25 cents and they give me 4 cents for whatever I pump back onto the grid. So Apple for $5, you get this iPower network on your phone. And now you're able to log into this virtual network where they will pay you market price for your power when you pump it on, and the customers will buy it at that price, and Apple will take a commission. And suddenly they're the largest utility in the country without owning a single power line, without having a single power plant. They're simply like the PayPal of electricity, where they're facilitating transactions between producers and consumers. And this becomes, so this is kind of the market that we're looking at. I think the next 20 years, we're going to see as much disruption and change in the electrical industry as we saw over the last 20 years in the telecommunications industry, where we went from party lines hanging on a phone in your kitchen to this worldwide internet and data and all of that. So it's going to be very interesting, but the utilities are going to suffer. They simply cannot compete. So bad news for the utility.
They're the dinosaurs of the modern era, of the energy era, right? Yeah, they're still.
They'll be the maintainers.
They're burning dinosaurs, and that's only going to last a little longer.
Yeah. So economics always wins. Economics always wins.
I'm going to put a plug in. If people have questions, put them in the chat, and Ella will feed them to us here in a minute. If I can stop talking here, but I'm really loving what Jay's saying. So actually, this last little discussion is perfect to set up the last question I have, which basically is, so what advice do you have for ACES and for me and the educational technical division going forward, given that I think you're onto something here? I think that's what's going to happen. The energy business and the use of energy is fundamentally going to change. We're not going to see any more huge smokestacks being built anywhere. So
Yeah. Well, I think, and to me, ASUS has a bit of an identity crisis, a bit of an issue here, and you and I have discussed this in the past. In the solar industry, NABCEP is an organization if you're an installer, and CEA is an organization if you're a manufacturer. Those are pretty clear who their clients are. ASUS, well, who are the clients? To me, it's a community for everybody else. It's a place where those of us who are interested in solar in whatever capacity, we should be able to go there and feel part of a community. So that's a goal for ASUS, is how do you build community? Well, that's always difficult. But ASUS has the credibility and the ability to own that information. And now we have to repackage this information about solar in as many different forms and formats as you can imagine. And one of the frustrations any of us who are in education deal with almost immediately is nobody reads anymore, and if they do read, they certainly don't comprehend it for more than 30 seconds. So I think we have to take this. The written word's still important because there are some of us old fogies with gray hair and the like, who still like a paper document where we can make notes in the column and have it and pull it off the shelf. It's a good technology. But we need to also have that information in video form, in audio form, in hands-on form, in face-to-face form. We take it because everybody learns differently. And so some people are auditory, some people are visual, some are hands-on, some prefer to read. Well, then you start looking at the declining attention span. So, how do we go from an hour down to a half hour, down to 5 minutes, down to 30 seconds? So we have to then begin to cut and dice and slice this meal that we're trying to give out there in a lot. It's not an either or, it's a yes and, it is, how do we take this stuff and make it appeal to whatever form, whatever your choice du jour is for bringing in that information. And I think we have that option. I don't see anybody out there pushing solar information on reels, or I guess that's about the only one. The little 3-minute clips things. Yeah. There's got to be somebody who can do that. I mean, that person is probably 25 years or less or younger.
Yeah, right. They know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go down that path, but I'm gonna ask Ella: are there any important questions, that we should answer before I keep talking?
Drew has been making some questions and comments, but I figure, Drew, if you're comfortable, maybe just saying them out loud, because you have quite a few. Maybe you can, and I think some of them already been answered, so I want to make sure.
Okay, I'll give it a shot, and I'll crib from what I had in there. I had thought this webinar was going to be a little bit more about the kinds of learners and students that are out there and what approaches might be made with each of them. So one of the questions I had was, and you could answer that with maybe 5 examples. But the issue I have right now is energy costs, despite the hype, are actually down in the noise compared to healthcare, insurance, taxes, and everyday life. How do we get people's attention? And then how do we address them? One of the things I run into a lot is nobody likes to put numbers anywhere in anything. And I'm a numbers person. I like to know what the annual output is per watt of panel, etc. So maybe some thoughts on how we can approach different people with different teaching techniques that address their style and get the basic information we have across.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let me address some of that. I can tell you from my experience going through with our courses and the different groups that I've taught, I tend to find there are people who want to enter into the workforce. That's sort of the traditional student that we think about when we're talking about workforce development. A young person, usually male, wants to go out there and get a job. And these are good paying jobs. And at least in my part of the world here in Ohio, if you can fog a mirror, if it's held up to your lips, you can get hired, and they're going to pay you, $40 an hour to install solar, which is, $80,000 a year, just to start. The question is, will you have a job 2 weeks later? So that's the big issue because people don't get out of their way. So there's that workforce development. Then I get a lot of usually male retired people who are just into solar and want to learn about it and maybe want to install it on their own home. So that's a different market. Then we get a lot of electricians who keep saying, I keep turning down these solar jobs. I want to know about solar because when I'm rewiring a house and they say, can you put on solar? Why am I turning down $20,000 worth of business? I should be into this as well. So they're professionals, and it could be electricians, it could be architects, building owners. I get people who are considering hiring an installer and want to make sure that they're not getting taken. So those are kind of the packages of people. And while it maybe think that it's a different approach for each of those, I think the subject matter kind of dictates, at least from a design and install standpoint. I think your question was getting more at how do we inform or educate the general public into understanding that solar is for them, that they should be looking at solar because we already know that solar is good economically, but who wants to prepay their electric bill for the next 25 years? If you've got an extra $25,000 lying around, your first thought is not going to be, you know what, I'm going to prepay my electric bill. It's more going to be, I'm going to buy me an RV and I'm going to go on a vacation to Cancun or whatever. So I personally find it annoying in the world of solar where we focus so much on payback. How many years will it take me to will this system take to pay for itself? People don't ask that. How long is this toilet going to take before it pays for itself? How long is this shower? How long is my driveway before it pays for itself? But we do this with solar. I think we should talk about energy as a forever cost and what cost will be cheapest. When you have various options, solar always comes up the cheapest. And I think we need to begin marketing and understanding and talking about it where, if I continue to buy from the utility, it's going to cost me $100 a month. But if I install solar, it's going to cost me $60. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. And don't worry about when it pays for itself. When does the electric bill stop coming into my house? It never does. It's a forever cost. So most people finance their systems anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's kind of rambling way of answering nothing, but
the cost of electricity has been going up considerably in the last 3-4 years, right? 40%? Am I right? Is that the number?
It depends on where you are. It could be much higher than that.
Yeah, maybe Hawaii.
John,
yeah.
We have one more question. Do you mind if I interrupt?
Oh no, go for it.
Okay. Amando, you are welcome to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You talked a few minutes ago about how can ACES reach new markets. I've been in the design build high performance homes for 45 years. Never heard of ACES, ever. For the last 30 years, I've been doing zero energy ready homes, zero homes. I participated in the DOE program from the moment it started. Sam Rashkin asked me to help promote the program by teaching, and so I did that until a few months ago, when the program was going away. Nobody really cares much about that anymore. However, I still promoting it, and I still design all my houses through those guidelines. But I was approached by Debbie Coleman a few months ago to join this organization, which, like I said, I've never heard of it before. I actually, she asked me that why shouldn't I participate in the uh, program coming up in Austin in October, which I did, and I was shocked that I was accepted. But so I'll see you all there. But
Yay.
the fact is that the fact that I don't see ACES, I've never seen ACES in any other conference promoting itself. I've never seen it at the Builders Conference, never seen it at the Architects Conference, never seen it at the USGBC's conference, and all this thing. So, should outreach cross stages with other organizations, maybe become more active promoting ACES to builders associations and architects associations and so forth. And that's just a question I have for that. I'm excited. This is my first webinar attending through ACES. So I'm a newbie. And so there's going to be a lot of new experiences from now forward. But I also know a lot of people that are heavily involved in designing these homes, Steve Basic and and administer. I mean, there's so many around the country, and people like I was talking to the guys at Energy Vanguard, Allison Baylis, who has a great blog about energy efficiency and HVAC design and so forth. And I said to him that a house that we did together here in Dallas, very large house, he had no idea about your organization or ACES organization either. And so he's now promoting it on his blog, about Austin in October. So I'll just shut up and I'll just say, how can we get ACES across the country to more people?
Well,
I'm
I guess
going to throw that
I
one.
can respond a little bit because having run an organization, a nonprofit organization, everything always comes down to resources. I mean, ACES doesn't have unlimited staff time or staff people for this. So as a member, we're part of that community that's supposed to be out there promoting. But it really is just a matter of if we do what I'm talking about, the same thing in education, slicing and dicing and putting these things out in as many forms as possible, I think you'll begin to see your reach broaden. Again, every one of those things that was suggested, lawyers, architects, builders, all of those associations should know that there is an organization out there where they can get information about solar. I mean, I found ACES because I thought to myself, there's got to be an association out there that does solar. I wonder who it is. So I typed in National Associations for Solar, and there it was. It's like it's not hiding, but it has to be something that's actively sought. So we've talked about this in some of the in the last editorial board meeting here with ACES, where the magazine that ACES produces is quite good. Many of the articles are very insightful, especially the ones I wrote. And then if we can broadcast those out to as many people as possible, free of charge, and it becomes something that comes up regularly when people do searches on other topics. And, oh, this is from ACES. What do you know? What's ACES? Okay. So all of those things happen, but it really is going to be an organic process. I think we lose sight of the fact that solar is we're still a teenager, as an industry. We're in the floppy disk age of solar. And those of us who have been involved for a good long time, we think it's more mature. We think it's more widespread than it is. And I'm constantly amazed by people who always say, well, solar's no damn good here in Ohio, right? There's no sunlight. Or isn't solar super expensive? That's what I heard. And I said, yeah, I heard that too 15 years ago. It's like, come on, man, come with me to this century, So it's just it's a constant battle, a constant renewal of talk to your friends, talk to people. But again, as an organization, as an industry, we need to disseminate this information in as many forms and formats as we can.
Thank you so much, Jay. We are at the top of the hour, so we got to go. But thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, Jay. That was such an incredible discussion and presentation. Thank you, John Steele, for being such an incredible moderator, questioner, and our education division chair. This will be posted on YouTube later today. So thank you all so much for your time, and have a great day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Ella. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Talk to you
Thanks
soon.
again.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.